Stop me if this sounds familiar. You know exactly what you want to say in your head, but when you open your mouth, it comes out slow, choppy, and unnatural. You're stuck in translation mode and it's costing you deals. Here's the truth nobody talks about. Your brain is wired to think in your native language first, then translate. But I'm going to show you how to completely bypass this process. You think you're speaking English, but your brain is actually running a translation software that's slower than dial-up internet. Every single word you want to say gets processed through your native language first, then converted to English, then pushed out through your mouth. This creates what I call the pain state, that mental prison where you're constantly searching for words, pausing mid-sentence, and sounding robotic instead of natural. Here's the shocking truth that most language teachers won't tell you. Even after years of study, most English learners never escape this trap. They can write perfect emails, they understand movies, they know grammar rules better than native speakers. But put them in a high-pressure conversation with a potential client and they freeze up. Their brain goes into overdrive, trying to translate every thought from their native language into English. The neurological reality is brutal. Your brain creates a bottleneck when it processes your native language first, then translates. Think of it like running two programs at the same time on an old computer. Everything slows down. The processing power gets split between thinking in your native language and converting those thoughts to English. This isn't a language problem, it's a cognitive load problem. Research in cognitive load theory shows us exactly what happens during this translation process. Your working memory gets overwhelmed trying to manage two different language systems simultaneously. The mental fatigue kicks in after just a few minutes of conversation. You start making mistakes you never make when you're relaxed. Your vocabulary shrinks because you can only access the words that translate easily from your native language. Picture this scenario. You're on a call with a prospect who's considering your services. You want to say, I can help you increase revenue by implementing a systematic approach to lead generation. But your brain is busy translating each part of that sentence from your native language. While you're internally wrestling with the word implementing, your prospect is already moving on to their next objection. By the time you get the sentence out, the moment has passed. You sound hesitant, unsure, unprofessional. This translation delay kills deals, not because your English is bad, but because hesitation destroys confidence. When you pause to translate, prospects sense uncertainty. They start questioning whether you really understand their business. They wonder if communication will be a problem throughout the project. That 3-second pause while you search for the right word costs you thousands of dollars in lost opportunities. The crazy part is that some people break free from this cycle while others stay trapped forever. You've probably met someone who learned English as an adult but speaks with complete fluency. They don't sound like they're translating. They respond instantly to questions. They make jokes that land perfectly. They argue their points with the same passion they'd use in their native language. Meanwhile, other people study for decades and still sound like they're reading from a script. What's the difference between these two groups? It's not intelligence, it's not natural talent, it's not even time spent studying. The difference is that successful English speakers learn to bypass the translation process entirely. They rewire their thought patterns to think directly in English instead of translating from their native language. This rewiring process moves you from pain state to gain state. In gain state, your brain defaults to English for certain types of thinking. You don't translate the phrase increase revenue. You think it directly in English. You don't search for the word implementation. It appears in your mind automatically because you've trained your brain to organize business concepts in English. The people who achieve this rewiring understand something crucial. Translation isn't just slow, it's actually blocking your natural communication style. When you translate, you lose your personality. You sound formal and stiff because translation forces you to use the safest, most literal word choices. You can't be spontaneous because spontaneity requires instant access to words and phrases. But when you think directly in English, your personality comes through. You can be funny, passionate, persuasive, or authoritative because you're not filtering everything through a translation layer. You respond to prospects with the same energy and confidence you'd use in your native language. This authenticity is what closes deals. The transformation from pain state to gain state isn't about learning more vocabulary or studying grammar rules. It's about training your brain to organize thoughts in English from the start. It's about creating neural pathways that bypass your native language entirely for specific types of communication. Most people never learn how to create this rewiring because they're stuck using traditional language learning methods. They practice translation exercises, they study grammar charts, they memorize vocabulary lists. All of these methods reinforce the translation habit instead of breaking it. They're actually making the problem worse by training their brain to rely on translation as the primary pathway to English. But here's what nobody tells you about creating that rewiring. The process isn't about studying harder or spending more time with English materials. It's about strategically changing changing how your brain accesses English in the first place. The biggest lie in language learning is that you need to live abroad to think in English. You don't need to move to New York or London. You don't need to spend thousands on immersion programs. You can create artificial immersion right where you are, in your current city with your current life. This method forces your brain to default to English without changing your address. Artificial immersion means creating an English-only environment in your current location. You transform your digital world, your entertainment, and your information consumption to English. This isn't about studying English for 2 hours a day. This is about living in English for the hours you're already awake. When English becomes the path of least resistance in your environment, your brain starts using it automatically. Most people try this completely wrong. They watch Netflix with subtitles and call it immersion. They listen to English podcasts but check their phones in their native language. They read one English article, then switch back to their native language news. This approach keeps your brain switching between languages instead of staying in English. You're not creating immersion, you're creating language confusion. The systematic approach requires total transformation. Start with your phone settings. Change everything to English. Your text messages, your apps, your notifications, your calculator. When you want to check the weather, you read it in English. When you set an alarm, you read alarm set for 7 a.m. in English. This forces your brain to process basic information in English hundreds of times per day. Your commute becomes English time. No music in your native language, no podcasts in your native language, no news in your native language. You listen to English podcasts during your drive to work. You listen to English audiobooks on the bus. You read English news while waiting for your train. This isn't entertainment time anymore. This is brain training time. Your information consumption switches to English completely. You read English news websites. You watch English YouTube videos. You get your sports updates in English. You read English articles about your hobbies. You follow English social media accounts. When you want to learn something new, you search for it in English. This creates thousands of micro-exposures to English throughout your day. The journaling technique forces your brain to organize ideas in English from the start. Every morning, you write 3 pages of thoughts in English, not translated thoughts, original English thoughts. You write about your plans for the day, you write about problems you're facing, you write about ideas you have for your business. This practice trains your brain to organize complex thoughts in English instead of your native language. You describe your daily activities in English writing. When you cook dinner, you write about the steps you're taking. When you exercise, you write about how your body feels. When you have a business meeting, you write about the topics discussed. This connects English to your real experiences instead of abstract grammar exercises. Your internal monologue starts happening in English. When you're walking to the store, you think in English about what you need to buy. When you're planning your weekend, you organize those thoughts in English. When you're solving a work problem, you think through the solutions in English. This is the hardest part because it requires conscious effort at first. The key is making English easier to access than your native language. You remove your native language from your digital environment. You unsubscribe from news in your native language. You unfollow social media accounts in your native language. You make accessing information in your native language require extra steps. When English becomes the default option, your brain chooses it automatically. This creates neural pathways that bypass your native language processing center. Your brain builds direct connections between English words and concepts. When you see a dog, your brain thinks dog instead of translating from your native language word for dog. When you feel hungry, your brain thinks I'm hungry instead of translating that feeling from your native language. The transformation happens gradually. Week 1 feels forced and unnatural. Week 2 becomes easier because you're not fighting the process. Week 3 starts feeling normal because your brain adapts to the new environment. Week 4 becomes automatic because English is now your brain's default language for information processing. Your brain starts defaulting to English when it's the path of least resistance in your environment. If checking the weather requires English, your brain processes weather information in English. If your entertainment is in English, your brain processes entertainment in English. If your work information is in English, your brain processes business concepts in English. This artificial immersion creates the same neural changes as living abroad. Your brain doesn't know the difference between being surrounded by English speakers and being surrounded by English information. The constant exposure triggers the same adaptation mechanisms. You start thinking in English because thinking in English becomes easier than thinking in your native language. But immersion alone isn't enough. You need to activate your vocal processing system because thinking in English and speaking in English use different parts of your brain. Your mouth and your brain are having 2 different conversations, and that's why you sound broken. You can think perfect English sentences in your head, but when you try to speak them out loud, everything falls apart. Your words come out choppy, unnatural, and slow. This happens because thinking in English and speaking in English activate completely different parts of your brain. Your internal English thoughts don't automatically translate to smooth external English speech. This disconnect between internal thoughts and external speech creates a massive problem for English learners. You practice grammar exercises silently. You read English books without saying the words out loud. You watch English movies and understand everything perfectly. Then you get on a call with a prospect and sound like a robot reading from a script. Silent practice creates a false sense of fluency. You think you're ready until you open your mouth and realize your vocal cords haven't been trained to form English sounds automatically. The solution requires speaking to yourself constantly throughout the day. You narrate your daily activities out loud in English. When you're making coffee, you say, "I'm grinding the beans, now I'm adding water to the machine, the coffee is brewing." When you're driving to work, you describe what you see. There's heavy traffic on the highway, the car in front of me is driving slowly, I need to change lanes. This isn't crazy behavior. This is vocal training that connects your English thoughts to your English speech. You describe your surroundings in English as you move through your day. Walk into a room and say, "This room has white walls. There's a large window on the left side. I can see 2 chairs and a wooden table." Go to the grocery store and verbalize your shopping process. "I need to buy milk, bread, and vegetables. The milk is in the dairy section. I'll get the bread from aisle 3. This constant narration trains your mouth to form English sounds while your brain organizes English thoughts. You verbalize your internal thoughts out loud instead of keeping them silent. When you're solving a work problem, you talk through the solution in English. The client wants to increase their sales, so I need to analyze their current marketing strategy. Then I'll propose 3 specific improvements. When you're planning your weekend, you speak your plans out loud. "Tomorrow I'll go to the gym in the morning, then I'll meet my friend for lunch. In the evening, I'll work on my project." This bridges the gap between thinking and speaking. The visual association method creates direct connections between English words and their meanings without translation. Instead of learning that apple means manzana, which means the red fruit, you connect the word apple directly to the image of a red fruit. You see a picture of an apple and think apple without any translation step. This bypasses your native language completely and creates instant word recognition. You use image-based flashcards instead of text-based translation cards. When you want to learn business vocabulary, you find pictures that represent each concept. For revenue, you use a graph showing increasing sales numbers. For strategy, you use an image of a chessboard. For analysis, you use a picture of someone looking at charts and data. Your brain connects the English word directly to the visual concept, not to the translation in your native language. This visual method activates different brain regions compared to text-based learning. When you connect English words to actual images, you create stronger memory formation. Your brain processes visual information differently than text information. The visual pathway creates more direct associations that don't require translation. You build vocabulary through visual experiences instead of vocabulary lists. When you're at a restaurant, you look at objects and think their English names. You see a fork and think fork. You see a napkin and think napkin. You see a menu and think menu. These direct visual connections make English words appear in your mind automatically when you encounter the objects in real life. The key is bypassing text whenever possible during this training phase. You don't read the word car and then think about cars. You see actual cars and think car directly. You don't read the word happy and translate it to your native language. You think about happy memories and label that feeling as happy in English. This creates emotional and sensory connections to English words that go beyond simple translation. This practice activates your vocal processing system in ways that silent study never can. Your tongue learns to form English sounds automatically. Your mouth muscles develop memory for English word combinations. Your breathing patterns adjust to English rhythm and stress patterns. Your vocal cords start producing English sounds without conscious effort because they've been trained through repetition. The speaking to yourself technique combined with visual associations creates direct word-to-meaning connections that bypass translation entirely. Your brain stops searching for native language equivalents and starts accessing English words directly. This eliminates the translation delay that makes your speech sound unnatural and hesitant. Now you're ready for the final step that makes this automatic throughout your entire day. The secret isn't practicing English for 2 hours a day. It's thinking in English for 2 minutes every hour. This approach completely changes how your brain processes English throughout your day. Instead of having separate English study time and regular life time, you integrate English thinking into every activity you already do. You cook dinner in English. You drive to work in English. You wait in line at the grocery store in English. This micro-integration creates hundreds of small English moments that add up to massive fluency gains. Micro-integration means weaving English thinking into routine activities throughout your day. When you brush your teeth, you think, I'm brushing my teeth, the toothpaste tastes minty, I need to brush for 2 minutes. When you get dressed, you think, I'm putting on my blue shirt, these pants feel comfortable, I need to find my shoes. These tiny moments of English thinking train your brain to use English for basic daily functions instead of defaulting to your native language. Most people create separate English time and lifetime, keeping the language isolated from real experience. They study English from 7 to 9 p.m., then switch back to their native language for everything else. This separation prevents English from becoming natural. Your brain treats English like a school subject instead of a communication tool. You can't develop fluency by keeping English locked away from your actual life experiences. The integration process works during activities you already do every day. When you cook, you think about the ingredients in English. I'm chopping onions, they're making my eyes water, I need to add salt to the pasta water. When you drive, you process traffic situations in English. The light is turning yellow, I need to slow down. That car is driving too close behind me. When you exercise, you think about your workout in English. This weight feels heavy, I need to do 10 more reps. My muscles are getting tired. You use quiet moments throughout your day to process events in English. When you're waiting for an elevator, you think about your morning meetings in English. When you're standing in line at the coffee shop, you plan your afternoon tasks in English. When you're walking from your car to the office, you think about your goals for the day in English. These calm periods become English processing time instead of dead time. The emotional regulation technique creates deeper English integration. When you feel stressed, you identify that emotion in English. I'm feeling overwhelmed because I have too much work today. When you're excited about something, you process that feeling in English. I'm really happy about this new project. It's going to be challenging but fun. When you're frustrated, you work through those emotions in English. This traffic is annoying, but I can use this time to practice English thinking. You practice managing stress responses in English instead of reverting to your native language. When something goes wrong, your first thought happens in English. My computer crashed. I need to restart it. I hope I didn't lose my work. When you're running late, you think through solutions in English. I'm going to be 10 minutes late. I should call ahead. I need to leave earlier tomorrow. This emotional comfort with English prevents you from switching back to your native language during pressure situations. The transformation creates English as your natural internal voice, not a foreign system you switch on and off. Your brain stops treating English like a special occasion language. Instead, English becomes the language you use for certain types of thinking. Business problems get processed in English. Daily planning happens in English. Emotional responses start in English. You don't make a conscious choice to think in English. It just happens automatically. This integration goes beyond intellectual understanding of English rules and vocabulary. You develop emotional comfort with English. The language feels natural when you're happy, stressed, excited, or frustrated. You don't need to be in a calm, focused state to access English. You can think in English when you're rushed, tired, or dealing with unexpected problems. This emotional integration makes English available to you in real-world situations. The micro-integration approach transforms English from a subject you study to a tool you use. You don't think about English grammar when you're planning your weekend. You don't worry about vocabulary when you're thinking about what to eat for lunch. English becomes transparent. You think through English instead of about English. The language disappears as a barrier and becomes a pathway to express your thoughts and feelings. Your English thinking becomes automatic because you've practiced it in hundreds of small moments. When you encounter a business problem, your brain automatically organizes the analysis in English. When you need to make a decision, you think through the options in English. When you want to express an opinion, the words appear in English first. This automaticity only develops through consistent micro-integration, not through intensive study sessions. But here's the timeline reality that most people get wrong about this transformation process. Everyone asks, how long does this take? And the answer will surprise you. Most people expect to transform their English thinking in 30 days or less. They want instant results. They think fluency works like downloading software. But your brain doesn't work that way. Neural rewiring takes time, consistency, and patience. The realistic timeline for moving from translation-dependent thinking to natural English flow is 90 days of consistent practice. Social media promises 30-day fluency, but neuroscience tells a different story. Your brain needs time to build new neural pathways and abandon old translation habits. The people selling you quick fixes don't understand how language processing actually works in your brain. They're selling you fantasy, not reality. Real transformation requires your brain to physically rewire itself. New connections need to form between English words and concepts. Old translation pathways need to weaken through disuse. This process cannot be rushed. The transformation happens in 3 distinct phases. Weeks 1 to 3 focus on breaking translation habits. This is the hardest phase because you're fighting against years of established patterns. Your brain wants to translate everything from your native language to English. You'll catch yourself translating constantly. You'll feel frustrated because thinking in English requires conscious effort. This phase is about awareness and resistance. You become aware of when you're translating and resist the urge to do it. During weeks 1 to 3, you'll notice your brain fighting the new patterns. Some days you'll feel like you're making progress. Other days you'll feel like you're getting worse. This is normal. Your brain is adjusting to new processing methods. The translation habit is strong because you've reinforced it for years. Breaking this habit requires consistent effort and patience. You're not just learning new words. You're changing how your brain accesses language. Weeks 4 to 8 concentrate on building direct pathways between English words and concepts. This phase feels easier because you're creating new patterns instead of just breaking old ones. Your brain starts connecting English words directly to meanings without translation. You'll notice moments where English words appear in your mind without any translation step. These moments become more frequent as you continue the practice. Your brain is building the infrastructure for direct English thinking. The middle phase is where you see real progress. English starts feeling less foreign. You catch yourself thinking in English without trying. Your internal monologue starts happening in English during certain activities. Business concepts start organizing themselves in English. You begin to trust your English thinking instead of constantly checking it against your native language. This phase builds confidence along with competence. Weeks 9 to 12 aim for natural flow, where English becomes your default internal voice for specific types of thinking. This final phase is about integration and automation. English thinking becomes effortless during the activities you've been practicing. You don't make conscious decisions to think in English. It just happens automatically. Your brain has created strong enough pathways that English becomes the path of least resistance for certain types of thoughts. The compound effect drives this entire transformation. Small daily actions create exponential results over time. 2 minutes of English thinking every hour adds up to significant neural changes over 90 days. You're not cramming English into your brain. You're gradually shifting your brain's default language processing patterns. Each small practice session builds on the previous one. Each day of consistency makes the next day easier. You need to recognize milestone markers as you progress from pain state to gain state. Week 3, you'll notice yourself catching translation attempts before they happen. Week 6, you'll have your first conversation where you forget to translate. Week 9, you'll solve a business problem entirely in English thinking. Week 12, you'll realize English has become your natural internal voice for work-related thoughts. These milestones prove the method is working. Some days you'll feel like you're going backward. This is normal brain rewiring. Your brain doesn't improve in a straight line. Progress happens in waves. One day you'll feel fluent and confident. The next day you'll struggle with basic words. This doesn't mean you're failing, it means your brain is processing changes. The key is consistency through these rough patches. Keep practicing even when progress feels slow. The setbacks are actually part of the process. Your brain is reorganizing itself. Old pathways are weakening. New pathways are strengthening. This reorganization creates temporary confusion. You might feel less fluent during transition periods. This is your brain abandoning old translation methods and building new direct processing methods. Trust the process and maintain consistency. At 90 days, English thinking becomes as automatic as breathing. You don't think about thinking in English, you just think. The language becomes transparent. You focus on ideas and concepts instead of vocabulary and grammar. English stops being a barrier between your thoughts and your communication. You express yourself naturally without internal translation delays. This level of fluency requires no conscious effort because it's become your brain's default processing method. But there's one mistake that can destroy all this progress and send you back to translation mode within days. There's one thing that will sabotage everything we just covered, and 90% of people do it without realizing. They reach for translation apps every time they encounter an unknown word. They use dictionaries to look up exact translations instead of figuring out meaning from context. They keep native language safety nets that prevent them from developing true English fluency. This over-reliance on translation tools creates a dependency cycle that keeps you trapped in translation mode forever. The very tools designed to help you learn English are actually keeping you stuck in the pain state. Translation apps seem helpful when you're struggling with a word or phrase. They give you instant answers. They make you feel like you're learning faster. But here's the problem. Every time you translate a word, you reinforce the translation pathway in your brain. You teach your brain to rely on your native language instead of developing direct English understanding. This creates a dependency cycle that gets stronger every time you use it. You encounter an unknown English word. Instead of trying to understand it from context, you immediately reach for your translation app. You get the native language equivalent. You feel satisfied because you understand the meaning, but you haven't actually learned anything. You've just reinforced your brain's habit of translating everything instead of thinking directly in English. The cycle becomes automatic. Unknown word appears. Brain searches for translation. Translation app provides answer. Brain stores the translated version. The next time you encounter that word, your brain doesn't recognize it directly. It has to translate it again. You never develop direct recognition of English words because you've trained your brain to always take the translation detour. Translation apps create learned helplessness in English learners. You become dependent on external tools to understand English instead of developing internal comprehension skills. You can't have a conversation without checking your phone. You can't read an English article without multiple translation lookups. You can't think in English because your brain has been trained to always translate first. The solution requires learning to understand meaning from situation rather than word-for-word translation. This is called the context clue strategy. When you encounter an unknown word, you resist the urge to translate it. Instead, you look at the surrounding words and sentences. You pay attention to the overall situation. You make educated guesses about what the word might mean based on how it's being used. Context clues work because language is naturally redundant. Writers and speakers provide multiple clues about meaning throughout their communication. If you don't understand one word, the other words in the sentence often give you enough information to figure out the general meaning. This is how native speakers understand new words. They don't translate them. They infer meaning from context. This process feels uncomfortable at first. You're used to getting instant answers from translation apps. Now you have to sit with uncertainty. You have to make guesses. You have to be okay with partial understanding instead of perfect translation. This discomfort is exactly what your brain needs to develop direct English comprehension skills. The discomfort principle is crucial for language development. Growth happens when you resist the urge to translate and sit with uncertainty. Your brain only develops new skills when it's forced to work harder. When you provide instant translation answers, you remove the challenge. Your brain doesn't need to develop English comprehension because translation is always available, but when you force yourself to understand English without translation, your brain has to create new neural pathways. It has to connect English words directly to their meanings. It has to develop pattern recognition skills. It has to learn to infer meaning from context. These are the exact skills that native speakers use automatically. This discomfort is actually your brain forming new neural pathways. The confusion you feel when you can't translate a word is your brain working to understand English directly. The uncertainty you experience when you have to guess meaning from context is your brain developing intuitive comprehension skills. The frustration you feel when you can't find exact translations is your brain learning to think in English instead of translating to English. The breakthrough comes when you embrace confusion and context instead of seeking perfect translation. You accept that you won't understand every word perfectly. You focus on understanding the overall message instead of translating each individual word. You use context clues to figure out meanings. You make educated guesses based on the situation. This approach leads to intuitive English understanding that doesn't require translation. You start recognizing English words directly without thinking about their native language equivalents. You understand conversations based on context and tone instead of word-by-word translation. You develop the same comprehension skills that native speakers use automatically. The key is removing translation safety nets completely. Delete translation apps from your phone. Put away bilingual dictionaries. Stop looking up word translations online. Force yourself to understand English through context, situation, and educated guessing. This creates the challenge your brain needs to develop direct English comprehension, which brings us to the ultimate test of your new English brain. Here's how you'll know the method worked. You'll have a high-stakes conversation and forget you're speaking English. You'll be so focused on the value you're providing and the problem you're solving that language becomes invisible. This is the ultimate measure of success. Natural English flow during pressure situations where money is on the line and your credibility depends on clear communication. Most people can practice English alone but crumble during important business conversations. They sound confident when they're talking to themselves in the mirror. They feel fluent when they're watching Netflix or reading English articles, but put them on a call with a potential client who's considering a $50,000 investment and everything falls apart. Their vocabulary shrinks. Their sentences become choppy. They start translating mid-sentence. The pressure reveals that their English practice was just surface-level memorization. The confidence-building process happens when when direct English thinking translates to authentic communication with prospects. You're not performing English anymore. You're using English to perform your actual job. When you think directly in English about business problems, you can discuss solutions naturally. When you organize your thoughts in English, you can present ideas smoothly. When you process objections in English, you can respond without hesitation. This transformation shows up in real conversations with real consequences. Let's picture a closer named Carlos who struggled with this exact problem. He could write perfect English emails, but his phone calls sounded robotic. He was translating every response from Spanish to English, creating awkward pauses that killed his momentum. After 90 days of thought rewiring practice, he closed 3 deals in 1 week. His English didn't become perfect, but it became natural. Now think of Maria, who used to lose prospects during discovery calls because she couldn't think fast enough in English. She'd ask a question, then spend the silence translating the prospect's response in her head. By the time she formulated her next question, the prospect had lost interest. After implementing the 3-step process, she started having normal conversations. She could listen, process, and respond in English without any translation delay. The business impact is measurable. Natural English flow directly correlates with higher closing rates and bigger deals. When you're not distracted by language barriers, you can focus on what matters. You listen to your prospects' actual problems instead of struggling to understand their words. You respond to their emotions instead of translating their sentences. You build rapport through genuine conversation instead of scripted responses. Your closing rate improves because confidence is contagious. When you speak naturally, prospects trust you more. They sense that you understand their business problems. They feel comfortable discussing budget and timeline. They don't worry about communication issues during the project. This trust translates directly to closed deals and higher contract values. The research confirms this reality. When individuals translate in their heads, it slows down their speech and can lead to awkward sentence structures, which can be a clear indication to others that the speaker is still translating internally. Prospects notice these hesitations. They interpret pauses as uncertainty. They question whether you really understand their needs. Improvisation becomes possible when you think directly in English. Real conversations are random and unexpected. Prospects ask questions you didn't prepare for. They raise objections you've never heard before. They change direction mid-conversation. The habit of translating creates a delay that makes it impossible to keep up with these spontaneous moments. But when you think in English, you can improvise naturally. You respond to unexpected questions immediately. You handle new objections confidently. You follow conversational threads wherever they lead. This flexibility is essential for high-ticket closing because every prospect is different. Cookie-cutter responses don't work at this level. The vision becomes reality when you're presenting to a $50,000 prospect and focusing on value, not vocabulary. You're not thinking about grammar rules or searching for perfect word choices. You're thinking about how to solve their business problems. You're calculating ROI in your head. You're strategizing about implementation timelines. The language becomes transparent because your focus is on the business outcome. Your presentations become more persuasive because you're genuinely engaged with the content. You're not reading from a script or reciting memorized phrases. You're having real conversations about real problems. You ask follow-up questions that show deep understanding. You make connections between different parts of their business. You demonstrate expertise through natural dialogue. The key insight is that fluency doesn't mean perfection. It means communicating thoughts and ideas without the burden of language. You don't need to conjugate verbs perfectly. You don't need to use advanced vocabulary. You need to express your ideas clearly and confidently. When you think directly in English, this natural expression becomes automatic. You become genuinely persuasive instead of just grammatically correct. Prospects buy from people they trust, not from people who speak perfect English. Trust comes from authentic communication. Authenticity requires thinking in the language you're speaking. Translation creates a barrier between your thoughts and your words. Direct English thinking removes that barrier completely. So here's what happens next when you master this transformation. The difference between good closers and great closers isn't just technique. It's the ability to think and respond in real time without language barriers. Start with step 1 today. Change your phone to English and commit to 30 days of artificial immersion. No excuses, no delays. Begin the transformation right now. In 90 days, you'll wonder how you ever functioned with that translation software running in your head. You'll close bigger deals because prospects will trust your natural confidence and authentic communication style.